My name is Gina Covarrubias. I'm an engineering life coach. And what I do is I help engineers and other technical professionals defeat career despair. And career despair could mean many different things. It could be I'm confused. It could be I hate my job. It could be I don't want to do this, but I don't know what I want to do next. And it goes on and on and on. So I help the STEM community with professional disappointment and professional confusion. Angela, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Angela Nichols. I am a transition coach, and my background is in learning and development and talent management. So I've been designing and developing and implementing human performance solutions to help people perform better in their jobs for many, many years. And part of that was developing coaching programs for leaders. And as I went up in my career and went into leadership, I started to realize that my ability to coach my team was very closely tied to my success. And so I decided to eat my own dog food and go get my coaching certification. And so I did that. I also have a certification in what's called brain-based leadership that really looks at how to create psychological safety as a leader with your teams. And it deals with a lot of neuroscience and how we manage change, how we manage getting feedback, how we manage situations in the workplace that can be stressful for people, and how as a leader to set these things up so that you can do them more effectively. So all of these things that I've learned about, I've kind of pulled into my coaching business, and I really focus on helping people navigate change in their lives and to be able to move through change in a way that's aligned with their values and their goals, and that creates a new normal that is the life that they want to live.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to touch on neuroscience in my presentation just a little bit as I talk about life coaching and what it actually is. And having said that, I'm going to go ahead and share my slides now. And we are going to get started with my presentation. And Angela, just give me a shout out and let me know that you can see my slides and that you can see them moving.
Slides are good.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize the video here. Welcome everybody, thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, my name is Gina Covarrubias. I'm an engineering life coach, and the name of my company is called Deliberate Doing. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight is how to get along with stress. And I worded that very particularly because it is not about how to completely get rid of stress, which is what a lot of us tend to want to do, and that only makes things worse sometimes. So I'm going to talk to you about this idea of getting along with it and kind of just having it there by your side and what that means and what that might look like. Here's a brief outline of my presentation tonight. After I give you an introduction to life coaching, I want to introduce a concept to you called confirmation bias. And then we're going to talk about stress, what it actually is, what does it mean? And then we're going to talk about how to get along with it. Introduction to life coaching. What I want you to understand, and this sets the tone for the rest of my presentation, is that there are two ways that we experience the world around us. I call that our externals or our circumstances. Number one, we could have a sensation, which starts on the surface of the body and travels up to the brain. The other way we can experience the world is through our thoughts and beliefs. And that's where it starts in the brain and travels throughout the body. And we call this feelings or emotions or energy. So we have a thought and we think about something, it creates energy inside of us. This energy or emotions, they are synonymous, are an arrangement of your body tissues. And at the bottom of the slide here, the big takeaway is that it's your human frontal privilege to choose what you want to believe. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we take a look at this schematic, the front of the brain is called the frontal lobe. That is what sets us apart from the animal kingdom. So the frontal lobe is where our intellect lies. That's where our executive functions and skills lie. That's where our cognition lies. Our frontal lobe allows us to plan ahead, and it allows us to work toward goals, unlike the animal kingdom. So not only is it our privilege to choose what we want to believe, but it's actually our responsibility. And that's a big part of my job as a life coach, is to help people understand what is it you want to believe for yourself. And here's a little bit of a neuroscience lesson. A neural pathway in your brain is the same thing as a nerve in your brain. And these nerves connect neurons, which are brain cells, to one another. You can think of a neural pathway as a roadmap. So if you have, picture a dirt road, and the more you drive on this dirt road, the more you're going to pave the way for that road, the easier it's going to be to travel. And that's how your brain works when you have thoughts or beliefs. The more you believe a thought, the stronger that neural pathway is going to be. And every time you believe a specific thought, the same neural pathway in your brain gets stimulated. So it's a cycle. The stronger your pathway, the easier it is to believe a certain thought. So this is really important for you to understand, because the brain likes to be lazy. It likes to be efficient. It doesn't really want to do work. So your brain likes to go to where it's easy to think. And the stronger the neural pathways, the more likely your brain is going to keep going there. And what we do is we get to the point where our thoughts and beliefs become subconscious. They're so ingrained, they become subconscious, and we don't even realize we're thinking them. And what I'm saying here in the second part is that it's important for us to direct our brain as if the brain is a toddler running around wild. Don't let your brain direct you. You have to direct your brain. You have to be in charge of it. And as a life coach, a big part of my job is to help you build new neural pathways or new thoughts up here to help you improve your life, essentially to help you direct your brain. Now let's go to section 2. I want to introduce a concept called confirmation bias. And the simple definition is written here in italics. Your brain seeks evidence to prove that its beliefs are true. So let's stop and think about that and ignore the slide for a second. Your brain has a belief. And based on this belief, your brain is going to go through life and scan and gather evidence to prove that this belief is true. Whether the belief is really true or not is a whole nother story. The brain just wants to be correct. Without questioning your own belief systems, you become prisoner to your beliefs or to your own assumptions. So that's one big part of my job, is to advocate that you question everything, question what you're believing. But that requires you to understand your belief systems. And that's another thing I do, is to help you understand your own belief systems. And once you understand what those belief systems are, if you don't like them or if you think they should be changed, one thing you could do is to try to reframe your beliefs. Now, if we look at this table, I've given you just a couple of examples of different ways that you can reframe. On the left, you might have a belief. Let's start at the top. For example, the world is unstable. To you, it's just a fact. You don't even think twice about it. But if I ask you to question that belief, maybe you could reframe it so that it doesn't feel quite as negative. And so on the right, maybe you could just tell yourself, okay, if we think about the history of the world, when has it ever been stable? Well, probably never. And it probably never will be. So again, on the left, by telling yourself the world is unstable, you might be creating a little bit of drama or stress that is unnecessary. Example 2, COVID is wreaking havoc. Everyone's getting sick, everyone's getting laid off, and blah, 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 blah. Well, if we want to reframe that and maybe reduce some of that stress, let's question that belief. And on the right, we could tell ourselves, COVID is forcing us to adapt. We are humans and we are adaptable. And that's what we do, is we adapt. Number 3, the president is great, or the president is not great. And you go through life and you gather all this list of evidence as to whatever it is you believe without even questioning. And what I want you to think about is, how can you reframe that belief such that it's not as stressful or it's not as negative? So on the right, perhaps you could tell yourself, the president is human. The president makes mistakes. The president is going to do some things great and other things not so great. And last, for some of us who might be either laid off or looking for a job because we don't like our current one, it's easy to tell yourself, I'll never find a job. And you believe that as though it were true. But what if you reframe it and you just tell yourself, it's only a matter of time. I'm going to find a new job. There are jobs out there. It's just a matter of time. So that's an exercise that you could try to reframe some of your beliefs if you find yourself feeling really stressful. And so at the bottom here, the big takeaway is that our beliefs or our neural pathways are reinforced by confirmation bias. So it's very important to understand what confirmation bias is and how it could work for or against you. Moving on to section 3, let's talk about stress. What is stress? Well, stress is a feeling. And what I mentioned a few moments ago, feelings are synonymous with emotions or energy. So you have a thought and it produces an energy inside of your body, or a vibration or an arrangement of body tissues. That's all a feeling is. It can't hurt you. It's just an arrangement of what's going on inside of you. In the second part of this slide, this is important to point out because stress sometimes feels to us like it's serving a purpose. For example, if I don't feel stressed, I must not care about the situation. Or we tell ourselves, the more I stress about my work, the more I'll get done. If I push myself and keep stressing, then I'll be more productive. And we tell ourselves that, believing it's true. And the third example there, sometimes we tell people, I'm so stressed, when they say, how are you doing? I haven't seen you. Well, I'm so stressed. And these are all the reasons why. And again, that reinforces that neural pathway in the brain. And sometimes we tell people, I'm so stressed, and we don't even realize we're saying it. It can become a habit in your brain because of the fact that you've built a strong neural pathway, and the brain likes to go to the strong neural pathways because it's easy for the brain. Stress is propagated by confirmation bias. Confirmation bias helps the brain feel correct. Now, the brain doesn't care what it's correct about. It does not care. It just wants to be right. It wants to be comfortable, and it's going to keep going and defaulting to the strong neural pathways. That's one reason why it's very critical to understand what is it you're believing, what is it you're telling yourself up here. And the takeaway from this slide is that when you resist stress, it is worse than actually feeling the stress itself. Sometimes we're so focused on getting away from stress, we just want it to go away. We're willing to do anything because we don't want to feel that uncomfortableness of stress. And that's like taking a beach ball here and holding it underwater. Have you ever tried that? Okay, maybe you can do it for a couple of seconds, but it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of work. When you're trying to hide from stress or run away or ignore it, it's like you holding that beach ball underneath the water. It is not going to last very long. So what can we do about stress? Well, we can try to get along with it. So I'm going to talk about that here in the next couple of minutes. At the top of the slide, what I suggest is, number one, identify what stress looks like for you, for your situation, because your stress and the way you deal with it is going to be different than everybody else's. How are you currently dealing with it? And I put deal in quotes on purpose. How are you dealing with it and why? Are you resisting stress? And if you just understand how you are dealing or not dealing with stress in your life, that's a big first step to getting a hold of it and to building resilience, is to understand, what am I actually doing when I'm stressful? Are you ignoring the stress? Are you reacting to the stress? And reacting could be yelling unnecessarily, over-parenting perhaps, taking things out on other people. Are you indulging when you're stressful? How many of us overeat when we're stressed? And it's possible we could over-exercise. Maybe we overwork. Maybe we just want to distract ourselves with our work, so we do too much of it. Maybe we used social media too much Netflix, too much TV, too many video games, too much gambling, and it goes on and on and on. If you are doing too much of any activity, it doesn't matter what the activity is. If it's getting you a net negative, in other words, if you're just avoiding stress, if you're avoiding your feelings, then it's probably not good for you in the long term. So I would challenge all of you to ask yourself, how am I dealing with stress? Is this the way I want to be dealing with it? And the option here that I listed toward the bottom of the slide is that you can create space in your life for stress. And this might be the first time you've heard it, but it is possible to allow space for stress to just be there. You can carry it with you like a heavy purse or maybe a sprained ankle. Is that ideal? Do we want to be doing that? Well, no, of course not. But the point is that you have the ability to be able to do it without stress impeding your life and holding you back. Can you be open to coexisting with stress at your side? Can you allow it to follow you around like a shadow? Sometimes in life, you can still carry on while allowing the stress. And this is very critical for you to know, because you don't have to get rid of it. Now, sometimes you can get rid of it, and if you found a great way to do it, that's perfect. But sometimes you don't have to get rid of all of it. You could just coexist. And in the next slide, I kind of run through how you can do that. Number one, first of all, you have to recognize when you're resisting. You have to be honest with yourself and understand what it is you're doing when you feel stressed. The second thing you can do is ask yourself, what am I thinking to generate the stress? Understanding your beliefs, once again, reframing them if necessary, is so critical to your well-being. So ask yourself, what am I thinking? What are my thoughts that are generating the stress inside of me? And number three, I don't think we talk enough about having self-compassion and practicing self-care. And I think this has become more popular since COVID has hit us. But self-compassion and self-care are really important here because, number one, negative feelings are part of our human experience. Negative feelings are always going to be there, and that's okay. We don't have to always get rid of them. But more importantly, we don't have to negatively judge ourselves. And we can get rid of that negative head trash up here when we say things like, I shouldn't feel this way, what's wrong with me? I should be stronger than this, I should know better. That gets you nowhere. There is no upside to beating yourself up when you are feeling negative. All you're doing is compounding the problem. So this slide is a very quick summary of what you can do to help yourself get along with stress. And I'd like to end with a conclusion. Starting at the top, what we've learned is that it is your human privilege to choose your own beliefs. So understand what it is that's going on in your brain. Number 2, confirmation bias can reinforce stressful thinking. Number 3, stress is an energy inside of you. It's a vibration inside the body generated by your thinking. The 4th thing I taught you, that resisting stress is worse than just feeling it. And so my conclusion, what I'd like to leave you with, is that stress is part of our human experience. It's going to be there. It is possible to coexist and to get along with stress in your life. That can help you create resilience for yourself. And I love this picture here. It's very relevant because the cat is getting along with the fish and the bird sitting on its back, and it's going about its own business, carrying this weight. And you can learn to do the same thing. You don't have to always get rid of stress. You can reach me at gina@deliberatedoing.com. I would love to hear any of your questions or comments about my portion of the presentation. I do have informational videos and a career blog on my website, which is deliberatedoing.com. And I will leave you with a quote here at the bottom by Stephen Covey. He is the popular author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I am not a product of my circumstances. I'm a product of my decisions. With that, I will stop sharing and we can take a quick look in the chat and see if there are any questions or comments at this point. And if not, we will continue. And Angela, I'm going to go ahead and make you the host so that you can share your slides. And we'll check out the chat at the end.
All right. Let me know when you can see my slides.
Yes, I can see them. Perfect.
Awesome. So I'm going to kind of carry on here from where Gina left off. There's a lot of things that she talked about in her presentation that that you're going to hear sort of repeated a bit in mine, and then we'll kind of carry on from there in terms of how to sort of bounce back from stress in our lives. Just a quick note here about me. I did a little bit of an introduction at the beginning and about my background. One of the things that I didn't mention in that introduction is my second love in life is yoga. And I've been practicing yoga for 20 years and teaching it for 9. And when I went through to get my coaching certification, I found a coaching program called Yoga to Life. And what it did was it wrapped a coaching methodology around yoga philosophy. And that really, really resonated with me. So in my coaching, I bring techniques from yoga, meditation, mindfulness, these practices or disciplines that to help people manage themselves both physiologically and mentally through changes in life. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm also going to start out with a definition of stress. So the definition that I have here is that stress is a physical, mental, or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension. And stressors can come from the external world. They can impact us from externally, or they can also come from inside of us internally. So things like we can have physical stress that's created in the body from illness, injury, physical conditions that are less than optimal, that require our body to expend resources, healing itself. So when we are under stress, it initiates what's called the fight or flight response in the body. And this is a very complex reaction of the neurologic and the endocrine system. It's a release of hormones that trigger a nervous system response that helps the body to prepare to either fight or flee, in the face of stress. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that works that way in our bodies. As Gina said, trying to eliminate all stress from your life is not the goal here. One of my, a book that I absolutely love is called Emotional Agility by Susan David. And Susan says that when people come to her and say, you know, I just wish I could get rid of the stress in my life, she calls those dead people's goals. Because if we stress is something that just comes with life, it's part of living, and not all stress is bad. We tend to hear a lot, and especially I think recently there's been a lot of focus on the negative effects of stress and the negative aspects, the ways that it can affect us in harmful ways, but not all stress is bad. This little chart on the screen shows sort of this stress affects us in sort of this curve that you see that looks like a rainbow kind of going over top of the little people. And most of us live normally without any stress in our life. We kind of live on this left side of the curve where the guy is laying there with his leg crossed and his arms behind his head, and we're kind of in chill mode. And when we apply stress from this place on the curve, it's known as eustress. And eustress serves to push our stress level up this curve on the left side. And as you go up the curve, you'll notice that performance increases. We go from being distracted, disorganized, forgetful, to being very focused, organized, and responsible. So eustress actually improves our performance. There is a top to this curve. We hit a top of the mountain, and that point is known by psychologists as optimal arousal. So when we hit the point of optimal arousal, that means that we've reached the peak of our performance. So stress is enabling our performance to its highest level. Additional stress beyond that point of optimal arousal is now called distress. And we start then down the right side of the curve. And you'll notice that as you go down the right side of the curve, that you are then lowering performance. And we're going back into that mode of being very disorganized, distracted, forgetful. Our brain functions start to degrade at that point. So there's a certain amount of stress that's actually good for us and helps to enhance our performance. And then there's a point at the top where we tip the scales, we hit a tipping point, and then more stress beyond that point is where it becomes harmful to us. The autonomic nervous system, our nervous system, is really made up of two components that are meant to balance each other. We have two parts of the nervous system. One is called the sympathetic nervous system. The other is the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is that part of our nervous system that's responsible for fight or flight. It's the part of our system that perceives threat. And when it perceives threat, it optimizes our bodies to respond to that threat. It shuts down functions in the body that are non-essential, and it diverts that energy to the large muscles of our body, to our heart and our respiration, to pump lots of oxygen and blood flow to the muscles so that we're able to run or to fight effectively. The parasympathetic nervous system, on the other hand, is responsible for what we call the rest and digest response. And when the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, it activates processes in the body that allow us to dissipate the stress hormones that are activated in fight or flight, and to bring our bodies back to a point of stasis. When we're in fight or flight mode, some of the things that come offline are things like digestion. If you're somebody, if I'm going to fight or flee, I don't need to be worrying about digesting food. And so blood flow and energy is diverted away from the digestive tract. And some people will have the experience of like getting a nervous stomach, where they tend to get stomach aches, or they'll get cramps, or maybe even feel like they suddenly have to go to the bathroom when they're under stress. That's that nervous system diverting energy away from the digestive tract. It also diverts energy away from the prefrontal cortex of the brain that Gina talked about, where all of our higher level thinking takes place. The prefrontal cortex is sometimes referred to as the Goldilocks of the brain, because everything has to be just right for it to function. And it requires massive amounts of energy in order to do the high level processing that happens in that part of the brain. So when we go to fight or flight, our body literally takes our prefrontal cortex offline, and we start to react and not act. We react out of the primitive part of the brain that drives our instincts and our just that autopilot of the brain, where we go into habitual patterns that we can drop into without having to do a lot of cognitive functioning, a lot of thinking. Ideally, we have a balance between these two systems. So we have sometimes where we have heightened periods of stress and we go into fight or flight, interspersed with longer periods of rest and relaxation. The human body is actually built for that. It's built for short bursts of stress, interspersed with long periods to recover from that stress. When we go into an acute stress response, when we go into fight or flight mode, it takes time for that response in the body to be mitigated. It doesn't go away instantly. The body needs about 20 minutes to recover from a very acute stress reaction. Adrenaline is released into your system immediately upon when fight or flight is triggered. And that adrenaline surge can take up to an hour. It can still be, our adrenaline levels in the body can be really high for up to an hour after a stress incident. And other hormones that are secreted by our adrenal glands as part of the stress response, like cortisol, they can remain high in our body for even longer periods of time. So we don't recover from stress instantly, and we need these periods of rest and relaxation in between stressful incidences in order to really allow the body to recover. The problem that we face today is that unlike primitive man, in primitive times, our stressors were usually life-threatening incidences. They were things like we were going out and hunting an animal, or we were being hunted by an animal, or we had a neighboring tribe that was attacking our tribe, or maybe we went through a famine or a drought where there wasn't enough food or water. And so these kind of stressors are definitely life-threatening. And so our body responded in a way to fight or flight helped us to summon the physical resources that we need to preserve our life, to survive. Unfortunately, our bodies don't know the difference between the kind of stress that we experienced as primitive men and the kind of stress that we experience today. So your body is going to act exactly the same way. It's going to have the exact same physiological response if you are responding to a deadline at work, a fight with your spouse, a feeling of inadequacy. Those same kinds of things trigger the very same stress response as a threat to our very life. And in today's world, we're living at these very high levels of stress that are almost constant in our lives. Our jobs bring stress into our lives that can, we can constantly feel sort of under-resourced and having too much to do. We're all balancing lots of things. Modern life has added new kinds of stressors into our life that physiologically our bodies haven't adapted to yet. We're not built to handle them. And so many, many, many people are struggling with chronic stress all the time. In fact, the American Institute of Stress, in their research, they've found that about a third of the people that they surveyed report feeling extreme stress, and 77% experience physical health symptoms that are a result of that stress. 73% have mental health issues that are associated with that chronic stress. And one of the things to understand about when we are in that fight or flight mode for long periods of time, the compounds that are released, the chemicals and the hormones that are released into our system, when they're there for long periods of time, they become toxic in our bodies. And so stress is one of the biggest things in our lives that builds toxins in our physical bodies. So we can't avoid all stress, nor should we want to avoid all stress. And a lot of things that cause us stress are somewhat out of our control. As Gina mentioned, sometimes we have to live with our stress and find ways to carry that stress. But sometimes we go through periods where our stress level is really, really high for a long period of time. Maybe we have a loved one that goes through a long illness, or we have a loss of a job that causes some financial stress or strain. We might have key relationships in our lives that we struggle with. Maybe we have, conflict in our relationship with our significant other or with our children or things like that. So when we go through periods of long periods of high stress, how do we bounce back? What are the things that we can do to help manage that while we're going through the stress and actually put our bodies into a state where we can bounce back? I've got the chart here, and we're going to talk about some of these items, how we bounce back physically and mentally. Physically, some of the things we can do are to practice detoxification. I'm going to talk about this in more detail in a later slide, but because stress builds toxicity in our body, doing detoxification is a really good way to physically bounce back from stress, to give your body the physical resources that it needs to bounce back. Rest and relaxation. We have to deliberately invoke that parasympathetic nervous system and give ourselves time of rest and relaxation. Sleep is one thing. We need to make sure that we're getting adequate levels of sleep. We tend to be, Americans tend to are chronically under-rested. Like we get too little sleep. We want to strive for about anywhere between 6.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep a night. But also there's other forms of relaxation. During our day, we want to make sure that we're not just go all day long, that we have interspersed periods in our day to just take a breath, to rest and relax, to do things just for pure enjoyment, to enjoy the moment, to have a conversation with a loved one or a friend, to take a walk, to enjoy nature, enjoy the outdoors, just whatever it is that helps you to just relax for a moment. We need to take time to do these things and intersperse it throughout the activity of our day. The other thing we're going to talk about, we're actually going to get a chance to practice this, is breath work. So our breath is a huge tool for being able to invoke the parasympathetic nervous system and to help our body to dissipate the effects of stress. And the other thing that helps us to dissipate stress in the body is physical movement or exercise. And you don't have to do like really hardcore exercise. Very moderate levels of movement and exercise can really help to mitigate the effects of stress in the body. So, a moderately paced walk, a few stretching exercises, things like this can really be great. You don't have to run a marathon. On the mental side of it, practicing things like mindfulness, which we'll get a chance to practice in a minute as well, gratitude, and meditation help us to detox the mind and give the mind a break from stress. Gratitude is a really important one. It's almost impossible to be grateful and fearful at the same time. So when we are being thankful for what we have, grateful for the good things in our life, fear lowers, and that just in and of itself lowers our stress level. Other things that help us mentally are putting our focuses outside of ourselves and our own problems by serving others, focusing outward, helping someone else. You can always find somebody whose problems are worse than yours are. And then, as Gina talked a little bit about in her presentation, being able to reappraise a situation, reframe it, turn it and see what is positive in this. Where's the opportunity? How can I look at this in a different way that produces a less stressful thought pattern for me, a less stressful, maybe makes me more hopeful than stressed out. So I'm going to teach you a little breathing technique here. So I'm going to give you a chance to practice this and get a brief example of how a breathing technique that can help you with mitigating stress in the body. This technique is called Nadi Shodhana. It translates to alternate nostril breath. So in this breath, we're going to breathe out of one side of the nose and then the other side of the nose, and we're going to alternate back and forth. So I want you to practice this with me. What I'm going to have you do is you're going to take your right hand and you're going to take your index finger and your middle finger together and place them right in between your eyebrows and about a ½ inch above. We're then going to use our thumb and our ring finger to close off one nostril or the other. So first, just take a big deep inhale through both nostrils. And then a full complete exhale through both nostrils. And then close off your right nostril with your thumb and inhale through your left. At the top of the inhale, close off your left nostril with your ring finger, release the right, and exhale through the right nostril. Inhale through the right nostril. Close off the right nostril, exhale through the left. Inhale through the left nostril, close off the left, exhale through the right. Inhale through the right, close off the right, exhale left. Inhale through the left, close off the left, exhale through the right. Inhale right, close off right, exhale left. Continue this pattern, switching your nostrils at the top of your inhale. And once you get going, maybe even close your eyes as you do this alternate nostril breath. You can even roll your gaze behind your closed eyes, up and in to the point on your forehead where your index finger and middle finger are pressing. Take a couple more breaths using one nostril and then the other. And then the next time that you inhale through your right nostril, at the top of the inhale, release your hand and exhale through both. Just keep your eyes closed for a moment and just do a scan over your energy and notice any differences in how you feel physically and mentally after just breathing Nadi Shodhana breath for a couple of minutes. This is a technique that you can practice at almost any time during the day, and a practice that's as short as 2 or 3 minutes can have a huge effect. This is a balancing breath. It balances the hemispheres of our brain, and it helps to bring us back to a point of mental and physical stasis. The next thing I want to talk about here is detoxification. I want to go a little bit deeper into detoxification. When we're under stress, we are building toxins in our body. And there's also a lot of other things in our life and our world that put toxins in our body. If we drink tap water, the water that we drink is full of chemicals. If we drink bottled water, chemicals can leach from the plastic bottles into the water that we're drinking. If we're drinking things like sodas, coffee, fruit juice, energy drinks, these drinks are loaded with chemicals and sugars that are not good for our body. Our food is treated with a lot of herbicides and insecticides and other chemicals, and they get into the food and they get into our bodies. And the animals that we eat are oftentimes injected with antibiotics and hormones and things like that, and that's getting into the food supply too. So these are a couple of tips on the screen here that if you want to detoxify and go through a detoxification process, and I recommend that everybody do this at least twice a year. I try to do one at least quarterly. There are like detoxification programs that you can use where you will take supplements or drink shakes that help the body to release toxins in the body. But if you want to do something that's really sort of purely natural and all on your own, if you eat and drink and do more of what's on the left side of the chart and eliminate or at least reduce the things on the right side of the chart, it's going to go a long way to helping to detoxify the body. So we want to drink more water that's been filtered, reverse osmosis, filtered water, distilled water, herbal and green teas, free range, grass-fed lean proteins, prebiotic fibers, healthy fats. These are the things we want to eat. We want to make sure that we're getting enough sleep. Sleep is key to detoxification. And another thing to focus on is there's a ton of chemicals and harmful substances in cleaning products and health and beauty products that we use every day. So switching to something that is purely natural, that does not have those extra chemicals put into it. For instance, you can clean a lot of things with just a mixture of vinegar and water very, very effectively, and it's very naturally antimicrobial and antibiotic, and eliminate the harmful chemicals that you're coming into contact with when you clean through your skin, through breathing it in. So this is great ways to help to detox your body. We're going to do one more activity briefly here before we end and take questions. I want to teach you a mindfulness exercise. When we talk about mindfulness, and there's a lot of talk about mindfulness right now out there in the world, but what I mean by mindfulness is being present in the here and now. We spend an awful lot of our time ruminating about things that happened in the past, which we can't change, and worrying about things in the future that may or may not ever come to be. And so when we're being mindful, we are just being present in this moment, noticing what's happening in this moment. And this moment is the place where change can occur. It can't occur in the past. It can't occur in the future. It can only occur right now. This is where you have the ability to make your choices, to take control of your life and to decide what it is that you want for yourself. So we're going to just do a brief mindfulness activity here. If you'll close your eyes for a moment, we're going to shut out the stimulation of the outside world for just a moment. And I want you to just focus on your breath. I want you to watch your breath without trying to change it. Just watch the inhales and the exhales. Become aware of your breath moving through your body. And then see if you can move that awareness out just a little bit. And while still watching the breath, notice your heartbeat. Can you feel the blood pumping through your veins and your arteries? Breath and blood flow. Now expand your awareness out a little bit further. Still watching the breath and feeling the heartbeat. Can you notice the physical sensations of the air on your skin where it's exposed? The feeling of your clothing where it touches your body. Temperature of the air. How it's moving in the room around you. Expand the awareness out a bit more. Notice any smells that you can detect in the room. Maybe there's a scent of a candle or an air freshener. Maybe there's a smell of dust or mustiness from the house being shut up all winter. Expand your awareness out a little bit more and take in noises that you're hearing. Beyond my voice, what sounds do you hear in the room? What sounds do you hear outside the room? For just a moment, release all thoughts and just notice you, your physical being, in the place where you're sitting. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Even just a moment of mindfulness can be really refreshing. That's my part of the presentation for today. If you're interested in learning more about my coaching offerings and what I do, you can contact me at my website, Paranama Coach, www.paranamacoach.com, or you can reach me by email at paranamacoaching@gmail.com.